The blizzard had buried Kansas in white silence. The temperature plunged to 16 degrees Fahrenheit as wind chills dipped below zero. 30 feet above the frozen earth, a mother bobcat and her kitten were trapped on a live power pole. The mother's fur was frozen solid to the metal crossbeam, her paws sealed fast by a crust of ice. The kitten pressed into her belly, trembling. Snowdrifts had made the roads impassable. Animal control couldn't get through. Then, one man spotted them. He was a lineman, and his only job was to restore power to the hundreds of freezing homes below. To save the Bobcats, he would have to do the one thing he wasn't supposed to do: cut power to 50 more homes and climb a tower of ice. He now faced an impossible decision: his duty or a deadly rescue. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The world had vanished under a shroud of white. For 2 days, the blizzard had howled across the plains of Kansas, a relentless banshee of wind and snow, burying fences, erasing roads, and silencing the land. Now, an unnatural quiet had fallen, the kind that follows a great and terrible power. It was the silence of a deep cold, a cold that cracked trees and turned the very air to crystal. The temperature in Norton County had plummeted to 16 degrees below zero, and with the wind still breathing across the drifts, the chill felt like a physical blow, stealing the warmth from blood and bone. For a mother bobcat, the storm had been a thief. It had stolen the scent trails of rabbits and voles, buried her familiar dens, and now threatened to steal the life of the single precious kitten huddled against her belly. She was a creature of shadow and stealth, a ghost of the creek beds and prairies, but the sheer ferocity of the blizzard had driven her from her territory. The snow was too deep, a soft, treacherous trap that exhausted her with every step. The wind cut through her thick winter coat, a knife against her skin. Her kitten, barely 3 months old and still learning the ways of the hunt, whimpered, his small body trembling violently. Driven by a desperate instinct to get above the suffocating snow and the worst of the ground-level wind, she had done the unthinkable. She had climbed. Her sharp claws, designed for the bark of cottonwoods, found purchase on the rough, creosote-soaked wood of a power pole. It was an alien structure, humming with a strange energy she could feel through her pads. But it was a way up, a way out of the white depths. With her kitten clinging to the scruff of her neck, she had scaled the pole, pulling herself onto the cold, hard sanctuary of the crossbeam, 30 feet above the frozen earth. Here, the wind was a different beast, unbroken and brutal. It lashed at them, driving ice pellets into their fur. Sleet turned to freezing rain, coating the metal transformer and the wooden beam in a slick, transparent armor. The mother curled her body into a tight crescent, tucking her kitten into the hollow of her stomach, trying to shield him with her own fading warmth. But the cold was insidious. It seeped through her fur, and the moisture from their breath and the melting snow on their bodies began to freeze, gluing them to the pole. Her right forepaw, pressed against a metal bracket for stability, became encased in a layer of ice that welded her to the structure. She was trapped. All through the long, merciless night, she had remained motionless, a sentinel of maternal devotion, her amber eyes scanning the white wasteland as the life-giving heat slowly, inexorably drained from her and her child. Dominic Urban felt the cold in his teeth. It was a deep, aching cold that his 4 layers of insulated clothing couldn't fully repel. His beard was a solid mass of ice, and his breath plumed in front of his face in thick, ghostly clouds. For 36 hours, He and the other linemen from Prairie Power Cooperative had been fighting a losing battle against the storm. The weight of the ice had snapped lines, shattered insulators, and toppled poles. Hundreds of homes, farms, and ranches across the county were dark and cold, their inhabitants huddled around fireplaces or propane heaters, waiting. Dominic was 58 years old, with hands as gnarled and tough as oak roots from a lifetime of this work. He had a quiet, steady presence that calmed younger linemen, and a deep-seated sense of duty that pushed him onward when every muscle screamed for rest. This wasn't just a job. It was a promise he made to his neighbors, to the elderly couple down the road, to the family with a newborn baby. He was their lifeline. "How's it looking out on County Road 12, Dom?" The voice of Earl, the dispatcher, crackled through the radio in his truck, tinny and distant. Dominic squinted, his eyes watering from the glare of the sun on the snow. "It's a war zone, Earl. Looks like a giant took a baseball bat to the whole line. Poles down just east of the Miller farm. I'm heading there now. I think I can isolate it and get the main line back up, but the Millers will be out for a while longer." "Roger that. Sarah called again, by the way. Said to tell you the stew is on and not to be a hero." A faint smile touched Dominic's lips beneath the ice. Sarah, his wife of 40 years. She worried, but she understood. She was the warm anchor in his world of ice and electricity. "Tell her I'm always a hero," he grunted, the words muffled by his balaclava. "Just an old, cold one. Urban out." He guided the heavy bucket truck through the deep snowdrifts, its chains biting into the packed ice. The Miller farm was isolated, tucked away in a small valley. He knew old Tom and Mary Miller well. Tom was 85, stubborn as a mule, and Mary's hands were crippled with arthritis. The thought of them without heat gnawed at him. As he approached the damaged section of the line, his gaze swept over the series of poles leading up the ridge. Everything was coated in a thick, glittering layer of ice, beautiful and deadly. He stopped the truck and grabbed his binoculars, scanning the nearest standing pole for damage to the insulators before he even thought about climbing. The line was humming, live, carrying thousands of volts. You didn't take chances. Ever. His eyes traced the length of the pole up to the crossbeam, and then he paused. His brow furrowed. There were two shapes up there, nestled against the transformer. At first glance, they looked like odd clumps of snow and debris blown up by the wind, but they were too defined, too organic. He focused the binoculars, his cold-numbed fingers fumbling with the dial. The image snapped into sharp relief. His breath hitched in his throat. It wasn't snow. It was fur. Brown, spotted fur, crusted with ice. He could see the unmistakable tufted ears, the ruff of fur around a feline face. And tucked beneath the larger figure, a smaller head, pressed tightly against its mother's chest. "Bobcats," he whispered, the word a puff of white in the frigid air. Well, I'll be damned. They weren't just resting. They were stuck. He could see it in the larger cat's posture, a rigid, unnatural stillness. Her body was a statue of frozen misery. As he watched, her head lifted slowly, and for a heart-stopping second, her wild, desperate amber eyes seemed to meet his across the distance. They held no aggression, only a profound and soul-crushing weariness. He saw pain in those eyes, but also a fierce, unyielding defiance. "I will not let my kitten die." A cold dread, entirely separate from the weather, washed over Dominic. They were on a live pole. The metal brackets, the transformer casing, it was all energized. A single wrong move, a single shift that brought them into contact with the wrong component, and they would be instantly electrocuted. And even if that didn't happen, they were freezing to death, welded to their icy perch by the very storm they had tried to escape. His mind raced. His job was to fix the power line. His instructions were clear. Avoid wildlife. Report it if necessary, but focus on the grid. An animal rescue was not in his job description, especially not a dangerous one involving a predator 30 feet in the air on a live wire in sub-zero temperatures. He should call it in, let animal control handle it. But he knew animal control was overwhelmed, their trucks likely unable to even reach this remote spot. And how would they get them down? By the time a plan was made, it would be too late. He could see the kitten was barely moving. He looked from the frozen cats to the distant silhouette of the miller's farmhouse, cold and dark against the snow. Then he looked back at the mother bobcat, a fellow creature fighting a desperate battle against the cold, protecting her young. In that moment, the lines of duty blurred. Fixing the power wasn't just about wires and volts. It was about life. He grabbed the radio handset, his decision made. "Control, this is Urban." "Go ahead, Dom." Earl's voice crackled back. "Earl, I'm gonna need you to cut the power to the entire feeder line on County Road 12, and I mean right now." There was a long pause. "Say again, Dom?" "You said you could isolate the section. Cutting the whole feeder will knock out another 50 homes. We just got half of them back online." "You heard me," Dominic said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "I've got a situation here. There are 2 bobcats, a mother and a kitten, frozen solid to the crossbeam on pole 74. They're alive, but they won't be for much longer. And they're sitting on a bomb. I'm going up to get them." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Dominic could picture Earl in the warm control room, shaking his head in disbelief, running a hand over his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with a mixture of awe and profound concern. "Dominic, are you sure about this? For a couple of wildcats?" "They're not just wildcats, Earl," Dominic said softly, his eyes still locked on the mother's defiant gaze. "They're a mama and her baby. And they're in trouble. Cut the power." After another tense moment, Earl's voice came back, resigned but supportive. "All right, Dom, powering down the feeder. The grid is yours. Be careful up there. And, Dominic, Godspeed." The low hum from the line above suddenly ceased. The silence that followed felt deeper, more absolute. Now it was just him, the cats, and the cold. Before he began his preparations, he made one more call, this time on his cell phone, hoping for a signal. He dialed the number for the Prairie Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, a small, struggling operation run by a woman named Clara Jenkins. "Clara, it's Dom Urban," he said when she answered, her voice sounding tired. "Dominic? Are you all right? I heard the outages are terrible." "I'm fine." "Listen, Clara, I've got a strange one, and I need your advice. I have a mother bobcat and a kitten frozen to a power pole crossbeam." He quickly explained the situation. Clara gasped. "Oh, you cannot be serious. Dominic, they'll be terrified and hypothermic. Their first instinct will be to fight or flee. If you just break them loose, the mother might bolt and abandon the kitten, or the fall could kill them in their weakened state." "What do I do?" "You have to secure them first, if you can do it safely," she said, her voice a mix of professional advice and personal plea. "Especially the mother. A rope, a snare, something to control her the moment she's free. Warmth will be key. Your body heat will be the only thing up there. Try to chip the ice away, don't just pull. Brute force will tear her paw pads right off. Oh, Dominic, please be careful. A scared bobcat is all teeth and claws, no matter how weak she is." Armed with her advice, he began to assemble his tools. He couldn't just use the bucket. The angle was wrong, and the arm wouldn't be stable enough on the uneven, icy ground. He would have to climb. He strapped on his spikes, pulled on a fresh pair of insulated gloves, and fashioned a makeshift snare pole from a hot stick, an insulated fiberglass pole used for handling live wires, and a length of rope. The first few feet of the climb were a brutal, jarring effort. His spikes struggled to bite into the ice-coated wood. Each upward step was a calculated risk, a test of muscle and nerve. The wind pushed at him, trying to peel him from his perch. By the time he was halfway up, his lungs were burning, and his arms ached from the strain of hugging the pole. As he got closer, the reality of the bobcat's plight became horrifyingly clear. The mother's fur was matted with ice, each hair a tiny icicle. The kitten was a frozen ball of fluff, his eyes closed. But as Dominic drew level with them, the mother's head snapped around. A low, guttural hiss vibrated from her chest, a sound of pure, desperate warning. Her lips peeled back to reveal formidable teeth. Her eyes, however, told a different story. They were glazed with pain and exhaustion. "Easy now, Mama," Dominic whispered, his voice low and calm, trying to project a peace he absolutely did not feel. "I'm not here to hurt you. Just want to get you and the little one out of this mess. It's okay. It's okay." He positioned himself carefully, his safety harness clipped securely to the pole. He could feel the life or death tension in the air. The bobcat watched his every move, her body coiled as tight as a spring, ready to expend the last of her energy in defense of her child. He extended the snare pole slowly, carefully. The mother hissed again, swatting weakly as the loop approached. He needed to get it over her head and tighten it just enough to secure her without choking her. It took 3 agonizingly tense attempts before the loop slipped over her head and around her shoulders. He gently pulled it taut. She thrashed, a sudden violent burst of energy that shook the entire crossbeam. The movement was so abrupt it made Dominic flinch. He turned his attention to her paw. It was completely encased in ice, frozen to the metal bracket. He took out a small mallet and a pry bar. "Hold still now," he murmured. "This is the tricky part." He began to tap gently at the edges of the ice. Tap, tap, crack. Each small impact echoed in the vast frozen silence. The mother bobcat flinched with every tap but seemed to understand, on some primal level, that he was not striking her. He could feel her watching him, her wild intelligence assessing his every move. He chipped away piece by piece, the ice falling away like shards of glass to the snow below. His fingers were becoming useless stumps, the cold seeping past his gloves. Then, with a final sharp tap, a large chunk of ice broke free. The paw was loose. The release was instantaneous and violent. Freed from her icy shackle, the mother bobcat lunged, not at him, but away, driven by pure instinct. The sudden jerk of the snare rope shook the pole. Dominic, off balance from his hammering, felt his boot spike slip on an icy patch. His world tilted. For a terrifying second, he was airborne. He yelled, a sharp, involuntary cry swallowed by the wind. Then the safety harness snapped taut, catching him with a brutal, rib-crushing jolt. He swung in the air, 30 feet above the ground, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. But his relief was short-lived. He heard a sickening grinding sound from above. The anchor hook for his harness, which he had screwed into the pole, was pulling loose. The ice, softened by the friction of his climb and the faint heat of the equipment, was giving way. The hook was sliding out. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. He was going to fall. He clawed at the pole, his boots finding no purchase. Dangling there, helpless, he looked up and saw the mother bobcat thrashing against the snare. Her back leg was now tangled in the rope. Her frantic movements, her desperate fight for freedom, were pulling the anchor out faster. And then, the impossible happened. In her thrashing, the bobcat's entangled leg jerked the snare pole hard. The pole, wedged against the crossbeam, slammed sideways, and the pressure of that movement drove the loose anchor hook back into the wood with a solid, definitive thunk. The grinding stopped. The anchor held. For a long, surreal moment, man and animal hung suspended between sky and earth, their fates intertwined by a rope and a shared, desperate fight against the elements. Dominic stared at the bobcat, and the bobcat, panting, stared back. The raw panic in her eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. A dawning, weary stillness. Breath ragged, adrenaline surging through him, Dominic scrambled back up, his spikes finding a solid hold. He didn't pause. He reached the crossbeam, unclipped the snare from his belt, and worked quickly to untangle the mother's leg. Then he loosened the main loop. She was free. She didn't bolt immediately. She stood there on the crossbeam, shaking, and looked at him. Her amber eyes held his for a single, profound heartbeat. There was no fear in them now, no aggression, just a deep, wild, and unnervingly intelligent appraisal. It was a look that passed beyond the boundaries of species, a silent acknowledgement of a debt, a shared moment of survival against the vast, indifferent cold. Then she bent down and nudged her kitten, who stirred with a faint mewl. Picking him up by the scruff of his neck, she turned, and with a grace that defied her ordeal, leaped from the crossbeam into the deep, soft snowdrift at the base of the pole. She landed silently, vanished for a second, then reappeared, shaking the snow from her coat. She gave one last glance back up at the man on the pole, and then melted into the dense thicket of frosted trees, a ghost reclaiming her world. Dominic stayed there for a long time, his body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. The snow bit at his exposed face, but he barely felt it. A slow, wide smile spread across his face, cracking the ice in his beard. "Well," he muttered to the empty sky, "guess we all got our power back today." The climb down was slow and deliberate. Back on the ground, his legs felt like jelly. He sat in the warm cab of his truck for a full 10 minutes, letting the feeling return to his hands and his heart rate return to normal. He called Earl. "They're down," he said, his voice hoarse. "They're safe." "Good work, Dom," Earl said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "Damn good work. The Millers can wait a little longer." That evening, sitting at his kitchen table, a bowl of Sarah's rich beef stew warming him from the inside out, Dominic felt a profound sense of peace. Sarah fussed over his chapped skin and the dark bruises the harness had left on his ribs, but her eyes shone with a quiet pride he knew so well. The story had already spread, as stories do in small towns, passed from the dispatcher to his wife, to her friend at the grocery store, and on and on. His phone had buzzed with messages from friends and fellow linemen. He was a hero, they said. But Dominic didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a man who had been in the right place at the right time and had chosen to help. He thought of the mother Bobcat's eyes, that final piercing glance. It was a reward far greater than any praise. Weeks passed. The great snow of that winter melted, giving way to the soft green blush of a Kansas spring. The creeks began to thaw and run again, and the prairie grass emerged from its white slumber. Dominic was out on a routine check one mild April afternoon, walking a stretch of the line that ran along a wooded creek bed, the same area where he had performed the rescue. He paused, enjoying the warmth of the sun on his face, and scanned the tree line. And then he saw them. On a sun-dappled ridge, 100 yards away, sat a sleek, healthy-looking mother bobcat. Her coat was glossy, her movements fluid and confident. And pouncing on her tail, full of boundless, clumsy energy, was a kitten, now nearly half her size. The mother's head came up, her ears swiveling in his direction. She saw him. She didn't run. She simply sat and watched him for a long moment, a silent guardian of the wild. Then, with a soft chuff, she called to her kitten, and the two of them turned and disappeared back into the green shadows of the woods, leaving Dominic alone with the quiet hum of the power line and the enduring warmth of a promise kept.